But onto this topic, it's interesting. It's something I want to go back to during this conversation. So if I forget, please bring me back
Sure,
to it, because I think
will
it's
do.
interesting to know about management styles and is the style inherent in the personality of the manager or the leader, or can you intentionally create a style of doing it and then presumably deploy it in different places, different contexts? It'd be quite interesting to judge. Um,
Yeah.
Anyway, folks, we're live. Welcome everybody to one of my favorite things to do. It is Founders Focus, folks. This is the midweek show where we speak to the business leaders who are changing the way in which we work today. This has definitely been something that has been such a learning curve for me, because I think that when you're listening to people that have set up a business, that have tried to create change in an industry sector, these are inevitably personalities from which you can learn a great deal from. So I've never had a conversation yet where I've not emerged and thought, I did not know this. So I'm really excited to be chatting today. This is probably the final Founders Focus of the year. And who better to close us off in 2023 than Aref Abedi, CEO of Jobylon. Aref, welcome to the show. Great to have you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great stuff. Aref, you're a busy CEO. What kind of like essential things did you have to postpone in order to join me for this hour's conversation here?
Yeah, I love that you assume that I had to cancel something, but I did actually. I had a session with our head of legal, so I had to cancel that one, to grab this opportunity.
Great. I actually feel less bad now because I thought you might have had to cancel something you would enjoy to interact with when you're speaking with legal. And this is no disrespect to the person running the legal department at Joblyon. I'm sure an amazing person, but I presume not a welcome part of the function. Which actually might introduce us to the job of CEO, Arif. I mean, it's what every CEO I speak to, they say it's a jack of all trades. You have to get across the business in every single function. Inevitably, you have to be like 80% competent at everything, but you can't ever be a specialist in on one bit. Are there bits of CEOing that you think you are good at, and what are the bits of CEOing you think actually I'm not good at, and this is where I need someone else to take on? Have you had that reflection and understanding yet?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's hard to define that title. In the first years, I had a hard time even saying that I am CEO because it sounds so grand, and it's a very, for me, sometimes startup-y thing. You have five people and then you have five CXO titles, and there's no one to be chief of in that sense. But yeah, for sure. I mean, there are, I think over the years, I've learned that there are certain areas I'm good at, there are certain areas I'm not good at, and especially that I don't like. Uh, but I do have an opinion in most matters, right or wrong, and I've kind of accepted that and embraced that's the way I work. I will always have an opinion. Doesn't mean that I know the answer though.
That's interesting. So there's 2 points you've mentioned there that's really quite worth exploring. Firstly, how do you know you're not good or at a certain task? A lot of the times people don't have that awareness. Like they assume they're good at coding or they assume they're good at this, that, and the other. As a CEO, you've got probably when you first sort of absorb the role, there's 101 things you've never done before. How do you get to the point where, okay, this is just a learning curve, I'll get there and I'll be good at it? Or actually, no, I could work 25 hours a day for the rest of my life and I'll still be average or below average at this function. How do you make that determination, Arif? Have you figured out sort of your own
Mm.
method on that?
I think for me, it's personally what I enjoy doing, what I'm interested in. I mean, I love working. My three passions in that sense is people. That's one. The other one is just product and tech and gadgets and all of those kind of things. I think we live in a super fascinating world. And the third one is I come from a background of sales. I love business and sales. And I think if you love something, if you're interested in something, you will have the determination to keep working at it, and then you'll become good at it, with just like anything else. I don't like doing budgets or forecasts because I think it's personally it's boring. I don't know how that works, so I'm never going to be good at it. I can understand it and I can challenge it, but it's better if someone else does it who actually enjoys that. So I think for me it's become that distinction. What do you actually enjoy doing, and then you'll excel at it. Then obviously there are some things that you have to do that you either like or don't like. Actually, I love the legal aspect we were commenting on. That's like my, if I would choose, I would be probably a lawyer in my next life. I think it's almost cool how you can twist and turn words and win a contract.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So I think the term is interesting before, where someone who's
Mm,
you're passionate about something that translates into greater attention. That then translates into greater competence, because if you're spending more energy, thought, and effort towards a certain thing over repetition, you are going to increase your capability of doing that. That just makes sense to me. Makes sense to everyone, I think.
absolutely.
Yeah, very, very good. How do you sort of balance between leaning on the strengths and covering the weaknesses? So, for instance, yes, you
Mm,
know that you will not forever be doing budgeting, but there's probably a competence bar that you need to get beyond in order to be a business operator of any serious business. How do you kind of, I guess, organize that so you get to that competence level, Arif?
mm. I mean, I think you, at the end of the day, you have a responsibility in what you do within your role. And if something is needed and you don't have people around you that can do that, and if it's something you are not strong with, you just have to do it. You just have to learn. I mean, I'm a true believer that there is a simpler way of doing everything, and it's a Google away. Sometimes I kind of joke about it, but I think it's, you can always do something good enough to get to the next step. And once it becomes a repetitive task and a need for it, then you should hire someone who can do it way better than you've ever done it yourself. But you have to do it. End of the day, if it's needed, you have to do it.
Yeah, and also as a CEO, of course, you're the main recruiter of the business up until at least a certain size and scale. So presumably you've got the ability to make early decisions in order to say, right, I've done as much as I can in this area, but now it's time for someone else to take this on because I need to refocus. So it's like a cycle of releasing work, so that you can spend time on other things. The counterpoint question to this, Arif, how do you make sure you don't get overly involved in the stuff that you really are passionate about and
Mm,
interested in? So
yeah.
this often happens on product, I find, where obviously product vision is there, but then CEO ends up getting into the minutiae of feature building and all this type of stuff, and maybe that's not optimal. So how do you kind of pull the reins back on that?
Yeah, that one is definitely hard, and I struggled with that a lot in the beginning, where I felt that I'll do that. It goes quicker. Let me just handle that. And I think it's a level of you want control of everything, and you don't want to let go, and you think that you'll do it faster and quicker. I think for me, it reached a certain point where you just couldn't do it. And I remember this specifically. I There was a certain department and function of my job had to do with a lot of our kind of existing customers, and I literally handed that off to my colleague who's today within our management team. And it was the best thing I've ever done, because within a day I literally saw that not only did she do what I did, but she did it so much better. And I think that's for me when the shift hit, in terms of like, you need to delegate, and it's okay if you delegate, it doesn't work, then you just figure it out. But I think after that, I truly do think and try and delegate as much as possible. I can still be passionate about something and be involved from time to time, but the last thing I want to do is being a bottleneck, which you become if you're going to be involved in every single thing.
It's amazing that you immediately visualize that moment, Arif. It sounds like it was quite an important point in your own development as a leader of a business to be able to,
Absolutely.
like, it's almost like handing over, I wouldn't say handing over your child, that's obviously not the same, but it's the sense of, this is mine, I've taken care of it. Can you tell us a little bit more about when you realized you needed to do it? It's dealing with customers. Was it breaking when you were dealing with it? Were you overwhelmed? Like, how did you know you needed to make this move?
I mean, I think a part of it is that you become overwhelmed, that you can't give, you can't do it 100% the way you want to do it. Another thing, in my case, I was lucky enough to have a person who just took it from me, who was like, "You're not going to do. I'll take care of this." And that's another way, right? Someone else just takes it and just runs with it, and then comes back, and became 2 times, 10 times better than you ever thought it would be. So that's another way of kind of getting that revelation that I never kind of approved that, but that worked, and that worked great. And fast forward that relationship today, the way that works is that if that same person comes up to me and like we have a problem, I literally ask her, "Do I need to know?" She's like, "Nah." Then I just don't think about it because I know she will fix that. That's a very nice, but that took also 10 years of a lot of, it takes time to build that type of um, connection or relationship.
Yeah, there's a trust, there's a relationship. There's also a personal quality though as well. I mean, when you mentioned that, okay, here's a person that can come in to the CEO who, by the way, obviously is the boss of the business, and then actually take it off that person's hands, immediately I felt, wow, what a godsend this person must be.
Yeah,
Because this person helps. It takes work away from me, doesn't generate work. So there's certain people out there that kind of create work for everyone to do, and it's like you don't want that type of person in most contexts, but definitely not in the context of a rapidly growing business. What you want is someone who reduces effort, reduces work, and can kind of get rid of problems.
100%. Yeah, and I mean, ultimately elevates the business. So I think that's where the key is. It's not about reducing admin. That's just kind of a side effect of it. It's more elevating the business and the impact and the value you're creating as a company.
How do you identify someone with these qualities, Arif? Like, if I'm recruiting, people listening to this will probably think, yes, I absolutely need to recruit these problem taker awayer types, but no one lists that
Mm.
on their CV. It's not
No.
it's an intangible quality. Like, how do we identify those qualities? Have you tried to find this, and what's the technique if you've got any thoughts on this?
Mm. I think it's hard. I mean, we have nowadays people in our team that are so much better than me when it comes to finding these qualities in a proper way. Back in the day it was gut feeling, and we're all in this space. Hiring based on gut feeling doesn't exactly make sense either. But I think in my experience, it depends on where you are as a business. But I always loved people with potential rather than experience personally, because you have this sort of hunger and willingness, and your potential is so huge. And if you, however, it's a two-way street, right? You can't just expect that from them. If you can create a culture where people can fail and that's fine, and you have that psychological safety, I think you see some of these individuals just picking things up and running with it, and that is created over time. So you always have your gut feeling, is this going to work out or not? But 50% of them do, the other 50 don't. But I think it's more about the journey, how you create that kind of environment, and having people grow into that.
Yeah, very, very interesting. There was an interesting tweet thread that I read from this. I forget, was it a VC guy or a CEO person? But he was talking about trying to identify what he called high agency candidates. And I immediately thought, I know what he means by this. It's someone who basically is not sitting there and wondering who's going to solve the problem, but
Yeah,
understands that they actually can deal with this and go ahead and deal with it. And he listed a load of questions that he asked people to try and surface up whether this person is high agency or not. I can't quite remember what those questions are, but I'll circulate it to the people here because I think it's actually really interesting. Really,
definitely. Yeah.
not to say this person knows everything there is to know, but I just thought, okay, there's most people are still looking at experience, for instance. If not experience, then there's a bunch of like, competency-based questions, all this type of stuff. I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but at the same time, are we looking for the real capabilities of performing when you can't predict what the problem might be or what the essential task is going to be? So, excellent stuff. Arif, let's rewind back. Let's jump back in time, pre your CEOing era. Were you always going to set up a business and run something like this, or was this a plan for young Arif as a kid, or did this just happen as a circumstance on your life journey?
No, this was not planned, and I never thought I would, start a business in that sense. I stumbled into this world, almost literally. So I studied engineering, not programming, but like mechanical engineering, and my biggest fear was to have a job that I don't like, because I heard people, oh, it's Sunday, I have to work tomorrow, and one day you get to retire, and that freaked me out because like this is what you spend your time on. You can't be like that. So I went to all sort of interviews, ended up in a career within sales, and I thought sales, that's not for me. I have a master of science. Sales is pushy. That's not what you do. But obviously, I didn't know what sales was. It was the best thing I've ever done. Learned how to run, do sales, how to conduct business, how to talk to a C-suite kind of level stakeholder. So that company, some people within that company basically started a business 2010 that had the name Jobylon, which I joined. That Jobylon was a completely different product. It was a different company. Everything was different. So I joined this organization in that sense early on from day one, as an employee, and I was in charge of sales. And then, long story short, a lot of things happened there, and we changed, and I had a lot of input on stuff, etc. And literally one day, I had a breakfast with the chairman of the company back then, and he said, you'll take the CEO role from tomorrow. And I was like, I don't understand what that means. So I literally ended up just here, and then today's Joblyon is very different. Today's Joblyon is part of something I've co-founded and I'm part of, etc. But it's been a journey. So I had no plans of doing this, but I'm very grateful that I got this opportunity and ended up doing it, and would do it again.
Yeah, amazing. I actually didn't know that timeline. And I want to take us back to that conversation with the chairman when he first dropped the bomb on it and say, "Hey, Arif, you're going to be do tomorrow. You're going to be CEO." Can you remember what your reactions were? And like, was it excitement or was it fear? How did you feel about it?
My first reaction was fear, I think. And my first reaction was, will I be able to keep this job longer than the one before me? That was my first fully transparent reaction. That was my goal in the beginning, like make sure my LinkedIn is you have CEO long enough so it doesn't become weird. And then 13 years later, I'm still here.
Amazing. 13 years. Tell me about this. So obviously the company has changed in that time. What was the big pivot to where
Mm.
Jobylon is now? And can you give us a bit of context what that was and why you kind of made that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also been one of our kind of our most defining kind of points in our history, and everything that has happened has literally defined the culture and the business and the way we run things today. But Jobylon was, it's always been in HR tech. The first product was a job board. It was our idea was to create a glass store for Nordics, basically, very simply put. So none of us came from HR. It was just an opportunity that, from a business perspective, that this could be interesting. This was like pre-Indeed and all of those things. So it made sense, and that's where the name comes from. Joblyon comes from a play of Babylon, which was like the center of all knowledge, and the idea was to have the job board that everyone would go to because you would find information about jobs, employees, financial data, etc., etc. And that completely failed, and and a couple of reasons. And one was that we did not know how to build a marketplace. We were good at sales. We would sell, but we were not creating a true value. And consumers, job seekers, did not know about us, which is critical for that business. So we went from a very sales-driven company, and then we went to the other extreme. Now we became our second iteration. So we've had a number of pivots. Our second iteration was, let's do a really cool, hyped up app. The goal was almost like, how do you get on TechCrunch? How do you get on Panda Daily? Because that's where it happens. So we created a Facebook app, which was called Jobylon Bounty. And the point of that was to turn everyone into a headhunter. So you would log in and we would match your friends and your friend's friend to jobs. And this was pre-GDPR. You could do all of these crazy things. and you could refer your friends to a position. If they get a job, you would get an iPad or a finder's fee, or something else. And that worked in the terms of the hype. So we got mentioned on Pando Daily, we got mentioned on TechCrunch, and it was like, this company is going to change the world, blah blah blah, but zero value again. So created no value at all, and that tanked as well. So I think we went from a super sales-driven company to a super kind of tech-driven company. And then I think we took a step back in terms of maybe we should listen to the market and see what they actually need. And I'm kind of simplifying this as well, obviously, a little bit. But so we started listening to the market and challenging the stakeholders. And our finding was that, hang on, no one is happy with their ATS. And the job ad hasn't changed in 200 years. It's gone from offline to online, but we're still used to text-plain ads that say literally nothing about why you should work for the company, and it's very hard to apply to them, while we still all agree that it's the candidate's market. So organically, we started creating an ATS, and honestly, I don't think we knew what an ATS was even when we had an ATS. I think the first time we heard the word ATS, we had already built a version of it, but that was completely based on listening to feedback, challenging the customer, creating based on that input. And just a note on that, so I think that journey, all of those failures and ups and downs, has defined very much our culture today, because the conclusion was, what's the point of all of this, and what's the point of working so hard if you're not doing something meaningful, if you're not having fun, if you're not creating memories? And during these years, we saw companies come and go. Most companies will fail. That's just the way it works. So the journey must be the thing that is the most important thing, and the people you're with the people that's with you on the journey, and so on. So that really defined the way we think about culture. Why are we doing what we do? How do we create the environment where everyone can reach their maximum potential? How do we create what we call happiness, basically within the company? So yeah, that's the shorter version of it.
It's really interesting how you're able to map back the current culture of the organization to those historical moments that were obviously part of that the journey, and it resonates with me a great deal. So I actually remember that era. I think you probably were at Jobylon when I was at a company called Brave New Talent, 2011, something like this. Again.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember those guys?
I remember Brave New Talent. Absolutely. Yeah. That was like a competitor-ish.
Oh, I didn't realize, but I was the recruiter for them. So I ended up recruiting their from 10 people to 40. So all the engineers and all this. And I remember back in those days, again, trying to leveraging the Facebook network graph, and okay, we can actually really spider off the brand into these different places. By the way, people listening to this in the post GDPR world, you don't know what you're missing, guys.
Because those were the days. Yeah.
It was much more fun doing product building pre GDPR. But no, that's it. So I totally remember what you're saying. But you maintain the history of the company, the cultural memory of those moments. And now you've got this kind of view that actually you have to make sure that the journey is mentally positive for people who are on it, and not one of these where you're crunching people towards whatever goal you think is right, because actually you don't. The failure that you've had in the past tells you that you cannot know or predict the future accurately. All you can do 100%. Is make sure everyone's operating at optimal level and high motivation. As a CEO,
absolutely.
Go ahead. How do you make sure that culture stays that way, or maybe that's the wrong term, because culture is a dynamic also. So how do you make sure that the culture is healthy in the direction you want it to go? Can you think of examples where you've had to make decisions that had cultural impact, or where the purpose was cultural impact, or have you kind of let it stand a little bit and did it more through acquiring the right personalities to kind of organically build the culture?
Definitely a tough one. I think I don't have an example of a scenario like that, but I think one thing we've been good at, but then again, remember that's after failing so many times in these aspects that we became good at this. We try and be very open and transparent about our culture, what we want to do, and we talk about it a lot, whether that is in group, if it's one-on-ones, which we try and do on a frequent basis, and get people around yourself to live that culture. And as you say, culture is dynamic, so it will change with the people that are in the journey. One thing that I have learned is that I remember when we started the company, we had a workshop to set our values. And I remember that for me, that workshop felt so unnecessary, because I was like, values, let's just pick up the phone and start selling. What's the point with values? Today, I'm really glad that we did that. And I don't think it's the values itself. No one has bad values. No one has, be mean to your colleagues. Everyone has good values. But I think, what does those values mean? So we try and talk about them, and how do we live our values? So all of our initiatives today, from our yearly trips somewhere in the world, to the way we set our salaries, to a thing we call happiness tax. So we have a lot of these quirky things. They all are a result from discussing our values. And having that open kind of communication and transparency with everyone, I think that has been a key part of keeping this culture. So I remember one thing that last year we had this decision that, okay, we're going to hire a lot of people now. So for us, we went from 25 to 50 people. For us, that's a big change. And one of our colleagues asked during all hands, how do we ensure that we keep this culture that we're all proud of? My answer to that was, the reason that you're asking that question is why I think we will keep the culture, because you care as well. If that makes sense. I think that has been key, that one person can't keep the culture. It's the result of the whole team. But if it's clear and in one direction, then everyone can keep that. My previous employer was a great example of that. We were 1,000 people, but the culture was identical whether you went to Tokyo, Stockholm, or London. Everyone were talking the same language, and so I think a lot of it comes from there.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Would you say, I totally agree, by the way, that if we kind of just scraped all of the cultural statements from every employer that's published them, we'd probably end up with pretty consistent, almost like cliche level values, right? So I think everyone agrees with this.
Absolutely.
Oh, but by the way, I'd love it if someone did set up a business that was like for mean, please do this. I would like to hear from you. Does it work or not, or whatever? Let's see it.
Yeah.
But it's the manifestation of them. Like, how do you actually live them? How do you actually pull the values off the wall, so to speak, and actually breathe and live them in the business? That's the determining factor. And as you say, being able to talk about the culture, so almost that meta cultural conversation is step one to doing that. The last 3 years have obviously been very challenging for culture, particularly with the shift to remote. And I don't know sort of what the situation is with Jobylon in terms of your working conditions, but there's a lot of people out there that are probably listening and thinking, you know what, culture was, I wouldn't say easy, but more obvious to do when everyone was in the office all the time. And you're spending quite intense time, 30, 40 hours a week with the same people. Inevitably, you're going to develop a culture. But now maybe that time is certainly less. We're distributed more. Some have gone completely remote. What's your thoughts on a remote, hybrid, on-premise, with a kind of a cultural lens? Is it harder, easier? Like, what's your thoughts?
Yeah. So to give some context, like when COVID happened, we were pretty remote already. So we didn't feel it in the same way. But initially, going back to those early days, we were a very like on-site company, 8 to 5, etc. And I can give an example. Once we hired a person who's still within the company, who, when she got hired, she told me that she likes to travel. I didn't reflect more on that because I like to travel as well. And then 2 weeks in, she said, "Hey, I'm going to travel." And I was like, "Oh, you're taking a vacation?" And her answer was, "No, I'm actually traveling to somewhere and I'm going to work from there." And for me, this was like, I didn't understand that. Like, what do you mean travel and work from there? We try to get people here. But then this was also very much in parallel with these discussions of happiness and culture and, what's the point of what we do? So I realized that, everyone, or I thought that everyone is different. So obviously this gives her the best opportunity to reach her potential, etc. And we did that. And it worked great. So since then, she's been traveling around the world and she works from a remote place. It started there from us, and then we did the same thing with a developer, etc. And we realized that hiring talent, if you want to do it on a global scale, it's just so much easier because talent is global. So we started, doing it remotely. Today we're 50 people. Half of us are not in Sweden, where we are based, and the other half of people that are here, they don't come to the office. Basically, it's the office is just a meeting point. So I think for us it's been working really well. But I think it's important to be. I don't think there's a right or wrong. You just have to be clear what applies for your company. In our company, we're not remote first, or I have a hard time with these words sometimes, but I feel like we are just remote friendly. Do your job, and it doesn't matter if you're here, if you're there, how you work, what times you work. It just have to make sense. If you're a developer, you don't need to work 8 to 5. If you're a sales rep, you do kind of need to work when your market is up. So as long as you can do your job and it works for you, because that's the flip side that people, I think I've seen this sometimes, that people come here, they're like, wow, this is amazing. I can work from wherever I want. 6 months in, they are bored because it's not fun to just be by yourself at home in front of your computer. So for us, I think it's about being clear. This is how we work. And our culture is as strong, I would say, online or on site. Obviously, it's easier to do things when people are here. But we had a great moment the other day. One of our colleagues came here from the Netherlands, and he was like, "Hey, man, this was like a waste of time because the culture is just as the same as it is on Slack. But now I just don't have time to do my job," which was a fun comment, and it was a good thing to hear because everyone is on Slack for us. So when we sign a deal, everyone looks very boring in front of their laptops, but within Slack, it's parties and emojis and GIFs and all of those things. So that's where we live, and that has worked for us really well.
Yeah, really, really great description. And by the way, folks, didn't you like the term remote friendly? That's the first time I've heard someone say it, but I'm gonna use it, Arif. So I think it's a really useful and accurate description of what I think a lot of companies would like to get to. So rather than like hard definitions as to we're remote only, remote first, etc., those types of things, which kind of feel like big rules, right? Like big red lines to people,
Yeah.
and that's like already communicating something that's about your culture when you have red lines like that. But remote friendly, so in other words, you're prepared to work with people if they want to have some sort of flexibility, then we're going to try and find an accommodation that works best for optimal performance. Really great term. Let's zoom out from the company a little bit, Arif, and look at the wider marketplace. Obviously, it's been a really interesting and difficult, challenging year for a lot of people in the recruiting space. What's your analysis as to where the world is in terms of recruitment in general, and then in recruitment technology in particular?
Mm. Well, I think there's a lot of exciting things that are happening in this space. It's such a fun space to be in right now, and it's almost hard being a tech company because you want to not pivot, but you want to let's do that and let's do this feature and let's do that. And if you're an ATS, I sometimes joke about it's like having a 747 Boeing. There's like so many buttons and stuff to take this thing off, so you have to stay focused. That's super interesting. I think it's absolutely been a tough year for a lot of us. We primarily work towards enterprise customers, and I think that there's been a couple of interesting points there because an enterprise client cannot not have an ATS. They will need an ATS no matter what. And from their perspective, it's not the most cost, it's not the highest cost in their HR kind of tech stack if you compare it with payroll or HRIS, etc. So we have been trying to, as much as possible, see this as an opportunity, because if you're not recruiting as much, then you actually have finally time to review your ATS and you actually can implement. And that is true. So we are seeing more RFPs, etc. But the processes are taking longer than we are used to. And cost is a very big factor today. It's never been an issue, 2 years ago. Now we're discussing a lot of like cost and budget cuts, etc. So I think, how do I summarize the question or the answer in that sense? I think it's all about like, how do you how do you identify opportunities? Because it is tough. It's tough for everyone. But I truly think in within all of these challenges, there are certain opportunities that you need to find, and you need to double down on those. So rather be kind of, offensive as much as you can than kind of defensive and starting cutting costs. And you got to do those things as well, which we do. But I think you win a lot by being offensive too.
Yeah, it's just again a version of the high agency person, high agency business, right? Like, are you taking control of the what you can rather than passively just absorbing what the external environment gives you? And by the way, I think the as you describe it does resonate actually mirrors a lot of recruitment experience that people have had, where they're saying we're getting more conversation with candidates, we're talking to a lot, but the cycle is longer. So
Doesn't
everything
Yeah.
is taking more time. So whereby previously you might close a candidate in what 30 days, it's taken 45. The same it goes with software purchasing or whatever decision. Just more decisions need to be made internally. And yeah, very key that everyone is on do more with less type mode, and examining sort of where the money is going and so on. Keeping with the
Yeah.
external view, what are your thoughts? Obviously, this year, last 12 months has been the year of generative artificial intelligence. Obviously, been crazy in the news over the last couple of days as well. What's your view as a product maker about artificial intelligence, Arif? How do you see it? How do you see it impacting product roadmap for companies like Jobylon? Where do you see artificial intelligence appearing within the platform as far as the users can see it?
Mm. I mean, in many ways, I think first of all, it's super exciting. I love these things. I'm a gadget tech kind of nerd in that sense. So I sign up on these things all the time. So I think it's super cool, and I think in many ways it will change everything. For me, it's like when we talked about 10 years ago social media, and everyone was like, social media, it's like it's the new thing, and you didn't know like what to do with it, but it's just part of everything, right? So I think AI, same thing, is just going to be part of everything on different levels. And you're seeing a lot of cool ways of kind of implementing and in different tools today. What I don't see is you're kind of like, I think there's a lot of companies that are disregarding the compliance and privacy issues. You're just running with it. And I think that's an issue. Something is going to happen, without a doubt, and then people will take a step back. And especially, I think we come from this world because we work with enterprise customers. So compliance and GDPR has always been a unique selling point for us. It started as something we feared. What is this thing? But then we learned it really well, and now we sign customers because we know GDPR really well. So from our end, we can't just plug in the Jobylon to OpenAI and just do whatever we want. We would love to, but we have to do, so I'm super interested in kind of responsible AI. Like, how do you do this in a proper way that actually creates also value? So there's a lot of cool things we see, but I haven't seen so many that are super valuable. I've seen one or two that I myself really like in different, not in HR tech only, but in different spaces. And I think the ones that are really creating the biggest impacts right now are the simple kind of implementations of some sort of AI. While the big and cool ones are more like fluffy, and it's not creating real true value yet. So I'm really excited about what's going to come, and I have no idea what's going to come. I don't think anyone has. So I think we're literally just touching the surface on this.
Yeah, I think we're at individual level. We're at individual experimentation. We've all played with it outside of our professional roles, let's say. I think a lot of functions have not operationalized it in any way, and I think mainly through compliance reasons, because it's new innovation, so it's ahead of the legislation. But we kind of
Absolutely.
know, generally speaking, that there's going to be a future problem here, and we have to be super careful if we start building processes around new technology that we think may fall out of compliance at some point, then we're going to have to rework that and rebuild and all that type of stuff, and that's maybe not what we want to do. So there's a kind of a breaking period right now, still individual experimentation, waiting, I guess, for more clarity on the legal side, and or maybe some rollout at enterprise level, platform level, where Microsoft is going to roll out a bunch of stuff as, and we'll have AI where
and I mean,
like
yeah, that's something that hit me just the other day with everything that's happening with OpenAI, that how in a way fragile the system can be. I mean, you have so many companies building their businesses on top of another one in this world, and then suddenly the CEO might leave, and that might change everything within that company, and that can have so many ripple effects, and just something I never thought about, and I started thinking about it these days when with everything that's happening.
Yeah, this last weekend, I think it's caused everyone to think about it. If you've built something on top of OpenAI's API, you're probably thinking now, actually, we need to have a parallel system, because we have no idea what the score is. And it is incredible. I think it's sort of a strong argument for the Facebook or the Meta vision of an open source large language model. No one owns it, and it's kind of impervious to these factional, what looks like quite an ugly factional dispute. But it seems that current status, it looks like Microsoft might simply absorb a lot of the human capital from OpenAI, and it actually suddenly we have a monopoly. Suddenly we have like a mega monopoly, which is probably not optimal, right, everyone?
Absolutely, yeah.
There we go. Okay, cool. Let's talk about entrepreneurship, Aref. We had a really good conversation online, like prior to this Founders Focus, where we're talking people, okay, we're now in a moment in the economy. Whenever there's turbulence, there's always like a emergence of new people setting up new businesses. I set up my first business 2009. That was a great financial crisis times. Like, right, I need to. There's no chance getting a job. I need to just set something up myself. Lots of people setting up on the entrepreneur journey today. What lessons do you think you can impart to those people that you've learned in your career path to date, particularly now that you're a CEO of a thriving business? What sort of tips or recommendations would you give to someone just starting out, like first time, they've never done it before, they've been an employee and now suddenly they're not an employee?
So a couple of ones that for me that comes to mind is definitely trust your gut more than you think. And it doesn't sound scientific at all, but I think when you are starting a business, you're such a believer in something, and sometimes it's just hard to express what you're envisioning in that sense. So I think staying true to your gut feeling and just go with it, but then also obviously own the result, whether that is a failure or a success. That's something that's one thing I would say. We talked about this. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree with you. I underestimate my intuition all the time. In fact, I'm so bad at doing this. I now second guess every second guess. So I've lost touch with my intuition, which is not what you want to do. Because I no longer trust my feelings, right? Because I've missed the analysis, and that's actually bad, because sometimes you're going to miss opportunities that way, or you're going to walk into a trap that your body tells you not to do this, but all of your logical processing says I can't see the trap, but you don't realize that your map is not accurate. And that's something I wholly, if you're in communion with your intuition, never lose it.
No, absolutely, and I have that as well. I mean, it happens all the time. So I try and remind myself that at least be very clear in what I believe in. I think we should go this way. I just want to say that. So that's step number one. Step number two is, how much do you fight for it and just do it, or sometimes just do it. I've been in scenarios years ago, especially, in the early days when you're trying to figure out, you have a board of directors telling you go left. And sometimes I did go right, because I was like, I'm still going to do this thing. But if it doesn't work out, it's on me. But if it works out, I can go back and kind of like express what I meant in a different way. So I think trusting your gut, or executing on your gut, I think in the early days, and throughout the journeys, is important. Another thing I would say, that I wish we would have done more, is to say no. And this could be, like, an example of this would be, try and really find which customers you should not have, and because it's so tempting to say yes to money, right? Because you're building, and we've always been bootstrapped. So if someone wants something and you can do it, you kind of want to say yes. And there's been a lot of good things with that, 100%. That's why we are here, we are today. But being having the guts of saying, like, you know what, I think there are others who can do this much better for you, in a long-term perspective, that is so valuable, and just focusing on what you're really good at.
Yeah, really, really good point. This is a hard one to learn for entrepreneurs out there, especially because, like, my first experience of setting up my own was actually not having a paycheck, and I knew it was coming, right? Everyone knows it's not coming, but I've had 10 years at this point of every month getting a paycheck, and then there's no paycheck, and I think, wow, that was like a moment of realization that, okay, you're on your own. You have to keep your confidence, and you have to keep doing what you're doing. But the pressure is on, and your vulnerability to take on tasks, jobs, clients that you shouldn't be taking on is so, so difficult. So that's one of the things that I would underline what Aref said. You've got to identify and understand who your customer is, and what the price of delivering the service, what the cost of delivering whatever service or product is to that customer. Because most of the time, for most of those people out there, it's going to be too high. And you're going to be basically spending too much, getting a little bit of money back, and you can't sustain that. And that's what's going to finish you as an organization. Okay, you got another one, the final recommendation for these young up and coming entrepreneurs out there. I should not say young, by the way, it's up and coming. I mean, it could be any age you could start this.
I think the third one for me would be, we touched on this before, but and it's also a hard one, but delegate early on, and create accountability and responsibility. Create that ownership, and with that ownership comes accountability. You will never be as strong by yourself. That's just a fact. Being able to delegate early on, and being several people running towards the same kind of mission is key. For us, it took a while to get there, and we kind of learned by not doing it in the beginning.
How do you create the accountability? So let's say I'm going to delegate my company. First time I've hired somebody, I've got a partner in there, I delegate. How do I make sure they're accountable to the delivery of that? I mean, a lot of people might be thinking, how do I actually manage their performance, I guess? You got any thoughts on this one, Aref?
Yeah, this is something we talk a lot about today, actually, and I think in theory it's easy. It's harder to do it in practice, but I think it's all about being super clear. So when you hire someone, what are your expectations? It could be a junior person, it could be a super senior person, but what are the expectations related to that individual? And that should be mutually agreed upon. So we expect together that you should be here within this time frame. I think that's something where, for example, we can be much better at, especially in the beginning. It's easy to always come to a sales rep 6 months in, and your numbers are not where it's supposed to be. But generally, we weren't as clear in the beginning. That's where we should be, because then it's super clear for everyone, and then with that comes an accountability as well, because you've agreed on those goals. So I think clarity is one thing.
That's a really good point. You could even use the term expectations, couldn't you? You could say, okay, Aref, we've delegated this to you. Let's agree some expectations as to what's going to happen at the result of this. I think everyone's going to say, yeah, that makes sense. I would want this expectation as well if you delegated something to me. So it's just about being clear and not assumptive in terms of, does this person understand what is required? Because you've been doing it, you've got to articulate it very clearly, and you've got to jointly agree that this is the end state that you think is reasonable to expect, and then review it after that time comes. Okay, good stuff. Let's pivot back to Jobylon, the product. turn of the year is always exciting, always interesting. What kind of exciting things can Jobylon customers expect in 2024, Arif?
Yes. So obviously, AI is a topic that everyone is looking at, which is something we are also following closely. So that is something we are working very focused on. But again, it goes back to that kind of responsible AI, as well as how do we actually create value. I think there's a difference of doing a gimmick that's great on your landing page, and you can use it as a sales kind of USP. And there's a different application of AI where you're creating true value for your ICP. That is something we're working quite a lot with. That we are expecting as well to kind of launch next year. We're also doing, again, within our ICP, a big focus for us is kind of reporting, insights, analytics. There's a lot of these things we do today, but how do you, again, everyone wants data, everyone wants different type of data, no one knows what to do with the data. So there's so many layers of like uncertainty when it comes to reporting. This is a huge project for us that we kind of are looking into as well. Those are two areas. Then we kind of, from our product strategy, the way we look at it is that you have the ATS as the core of the talent acquisition suite, and we are exploring various kind of add-ons on top of the ATS that would strengthen your talent acquisition strategy. That could be a referral module, it could be AI screening, it could be XYZ. So that's an area as well we're looking at as well. How can we create even more value for our existing customer base by kind of consolidating more of their needs into one suite. So there's a couple of different things. Then again, our roadmap has always been, we try and not plan things more than 3 months ahead, with the reason being that we know that things will come up all the time, and trying to stay agile with the resources we have. And that's something that has brought us the success we've had so far. So there's a lot of ideas, but then it's also really listening to the market, but also challenging the market, and then based on that, make a decision and ship something out.
Excellent. And tell us a little bit about the market plans, Arif. Right now, obviously, Jobylon strong in the Nordics, strong in territories in different parts of Europe also. Are there particular markets you're interested in? Is there a particular customer profile that it would be most interesting to connect with for Jobylon?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, today we primarily work with companies with 500 employees and upwards that are, however, larger companies and with an international presence. So we do have hiring managers in 80 countries actively working with our tool today, but most of them will boil down to kind of Scandinavian contracts, and that through them we have expanded to other accounts. We this year started targeting also the Benelux region as an area, which has been really interesting. We actually onboarded a customer just today, one of our first ones there, so that's super fun. So the Netherlands and the Benelux region is going to be a key focus, and then obviously we're looking at what's the next one. Is it Germany? Is it the DACH area, which has its main opportunities and also challenges as well? UK we've looked at, but none of these are decided so far. So right now it's Scandinavia and the Benelux region actively focusing on, and then discussing on what's the next one. Overall, I would say European companies are where we are best, because of actually the focus on compliance, GDPR, privacy. That is one of our strengths.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And it's we need to say a quick word about the Swedish kind of HR work tech ecosystem that seems to have gone from strength to strength. It's maybe if you rewind back 10 years or so ago, people outside of Sweden probably would not encounter any sort of work tech from Sweden, but now you see lots of different products, ATSs, assessment tools, advertising software. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of what your theory is as to why that is? Like, why has this ecosystem emerged, and why have these products landed so well outside of the core market?
I think part of it is that Sweden has had a strong tech scene and then a strong history, going back from not only Spotify, but go to Skype and Ericsson and IKEA. There's always been a strong entrepreneurial kind of history, not in Sweden only, but in Scandinavia. And I think if you combine that with the fact that HR, that space is such an opportunity. So as an entrepreneur and within tech, you will find these opportunities. I mean, like us in this case, none of us came from HR. It was just an interesting opportunity where you could create a business. And there are so many things in this space, in the HR tech kind of world. And that's why I think we're seeing a lot of ventures coming from here, because they have always come from here, and now this space in itself is very interesting.
Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with that ecosystem? Do you support each other as like, oh, let's all go together and conquer the rest of Europe? Or did you like have antagonism? We want to be the Swedish champion here.
No,
how's your relationship?
not at all. I mean, it's such a friendly space, to be honest. And I mean, you have companies like Alva Labs, RefApp, Trust Group. These are all like within the HR tech space. We talk to them on a daily basis. But also your competitors. I love talking to competitors, and with the CEO of another competitor, and like, how do you guys do that, and how do we do this? And I think generally tech companies that are more modern are open to talk. There's no point of, you can rip with pride. It doesn't matter. You're going to do it anyway. So there are just so many synergies if you just talk. I think it's more fun when these like legacy vendors try and sneak into your app and pretend to talk to you in the support, and that's them, etc. So I would say it's a very friendly scene, and I love that. I think we're so much stronger together, and it's definitely not winner takes it all in this space.
No, and the ATS marketplace is fragmented for a reason. It's not it's not a failure of the market that it's fragmented. It's simply that the needs of different companies are very different, and you'll always have optimized tools for certain sectors, regions, even like sort of where you're at as a business. If you're a company that's just trying to sprint fast at 0 to 50 people, you need a different product compared to a mature organization that's maintaining its workforce. So you've got a very different sets of solutions, not one size fits all. So I think the ecosystem overall is going to be very, very healthy. Okay, Aref, final question for you before we let you go. I know you're a very busy man. I'm always conscious, by the way, whenever I do a Founders Focus, is like, how much money am I costing this company by taking away the CEO for an hour? It's like, I feel really guilty. But what busy things are you doing after this call? What's on the CEO agenda for you rest of the day, Aref?
What is on I have to check my agenda. So I'm jumping into a sales call in half an hour, a demo call. So I'm very hands-on still. I love to be that. And then we have a session with our product manager, and then I'm having a dinner with one of our colleagues. So and then tomorrow I'm off to Amsterdam to meet my other colleague and go for meetings.
Fantastic. Well, Aref, very best of luck with your rest of your day, and safe travels for your journey tomorrow. It's been really great having a chat with you and learning more about your journey and also about your product. For people that are interested in Jobylon as an ATS, how do they get in touch with I guess it's jobylon.com is the website, is the best place to go?
Absolutely. Jobylon.com or DM me, add me on LinkedIn if you have any questions about that or anything at all. Happy to connect.
Fantastic stuff. There we have it, folks. It's Aref Abedi, CEO at Jobylon on Founders Focus. Thank you very much for your time, Aref.
Thank you, Hong. Thank you for having me. Have a good one.
Wasn't that great, everybody? I told you the most interesting conversations happen at the level of people who've set up companies trying to change the way in which we work today. That was episode 40 of Founders Focus with Aref Abedi, CEO of Jobylon. We'll be bringing this series back in 2024. I think it's a super interesting one and also valuable for the community. If you are interested in conversations of this type, make sure you follow the channel. We do these midweek when we can, as well as, of course, Springfield Lives on Friday. Okay, that's about it. Have a good day, everybody. We'll see you next time.